what purpose does a gentlewoman from California?
Pass,
For what purpose does a
HR
gentlewoman from
1916.
California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1916, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1916, a bill to provide health insurance benefits for outpatient and inpatient items and services related to the diagnosis and treatment of a congenital anomaly or birth defect.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Eshoo, and the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 1916.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlewoman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise in full support of H.R. 1916, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. On behalf of the 4% of American children born annually with congenital anomalies or birth defects, I'm very proud to sponsor this much-needed legislation. This bill will ensure that health plans do not deny or delay medically necessary treatment of congenital anomalies. In many cases, coverage is for well-known anomalies like heart defects or spina bifida is already the standard. But for babies who have oral defects such as cleft plates, skeletal defects, congenital cataracts, or hearing defects, insurance companies have systematically denied or delayed medically necessary treatments. I became a sponsor of this legislation after Kevin Kozer testified at our health subcommittee, which you are a member of, Madam Speaker, about his beautiful son, Cannon. He shared with the subcommittee how Cannon asked Santa Claus for teeth so he could chomp big bites of food. I was really shaken by that. By the fact that in our country, such a rich and great country as America, that we would put treatment that allow a child to eat out of reach because of insurance red tape. A baby named Rosie in my congressional district is one of the 1,300 babies born in the United States each year with congenital cataracts. In just a few months, her family spent over $4,000 out of pocket on contact lenses for her. Now, without these lenses, babies like Rosie are blind, and they have no chance of ever developing normal vision. These stories are repeated across our country every single day. But today is the day that we can begin to change that. This legislation is one of the most popular bills in the House, with 316 bipartisan co-sponsors, including more than half of the Republican conference. The time has come for this important, popular, and much-needed bill to finally pass the House of Representatives, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I yield to myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am disappointed that all members could not reach an agreement on this bill. I have an amendment that would specify the types of conditions required to be addressed by this bill, which would help clarify its intent for implementing agencies. Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to include in the record the text of my proposed amendment.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, the stated goal of the bill is a good one, making sure those who, through no fault of their own, are born with a condition requiring extensive medical care that can eat, drink, and thrive. I would love to be able to tell families like the one in my district with 2 children experiencing ectodermal dysplasia that insurance would pay for the hundreds of thousands of dollars of surgery necessary to allow their teeth and mouth to function properly. But this bill needs more work, and my amendment could have addressed its most significant flaw. Had the bill gone through regular order, I would have offered this corrective amendment. The biggest problem here is that not one person can articulate which medical procedures or treatments would be required to be covered by insurance. Now, the bill is entitled Healthy Smiles, referencing cleft palate, the ectodermal dysplasia, etc. But not one person can articulate which medical procedures or treatments would be required to be covered by insurance. This is in part because the FDA has no statutory or regulatory definition of what a congenital anomaly or birth defect is. Further, one part of the bill requires insurers to include any medical necessary item or service to restore any body part to achieve normal body functioning or appearance, while another part provides that treatment shall not include cosmetic surgery. Technical comments from the Department of Labor support my belief that these two provisions seem to be in tension. There's a tension between the two sections. Because the language is so vague, CBO found it difficult to estimate the cost. They expressed uncertainty around identifying the procedures and services that would be considered medically necessary. But nonetheless, they took a stab at it and guessed it would cost around $1.8 billion. My amendment would resolve these concerns by replacing the phrase congenital anomaly or birth defect with craniofacial, oral, or maxillofacial congenital anomaly or birth defect to specify the types of conditions advocates of this bill have been discussing for months, and which most of the people who signed on as co-sponsors thought that's just what they were doing. They didn't know they were going to cover, as the gentlelady has said, the 4% of children born with any kind of a birth defect. Given that my amendment cannot be considered today, I will be voting no. Now, you may wonder, how did I come to this conclusion? When my oldest son was born 16 years ago, the first question when I called my wife's father was, does he have all his fingernails? Because my wife was born with a congenital birth defect. She doesn't have the fingernails on her index fingers. This has caused them to be injured numerous times over the years. There's no question it qualifies under this bill for some kind of treatment, whether it be an implant to replace those nails. If this bill passes, we'll be doing everything from the healthy smiles that the bill purports to do, all the way down to fingernails and less. Now, she's fine. She's grown up. She's adjusted. Everything is good. But the first question my father-in-law asked was, does he have all his fingernails? Because for years it was a concern to him as a father and as a parent. And this bill would deal with that. And that's why it's hard to say, what's it going to cost? Because a lot of smaller defects, like my wife's fingernails, would be covered under this. And if it's covered, by golly, you know they're going to fix it. The worst thing she has to do now is wear gloves when we take out the Christmas tree and try to be careful. But as a child, it was bigger. And like I said, her fingers, at the tips of her index fingers are a little bulbous. She might be offended by this, but if you look closely, it looks a little bit, not quite as long, but looks a little bit like E.T.'s finger. It doesn't light up, but it is a birth defect that this bill would cover at huge cost to the American public and the American taxpayers. The bill goes too far. I wish we would accept I wish we had the opportunity to accept my amendment, which we can't do on a bill that's on suspension, because then we could make sure it dealt with the big items that only affect a much smaller part of the population and that truly do need to be dealt with. And with that, I reserve the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Madam Speaker, the bill that we're taking up today was passed by the Energy and Commerce Committee. It hasn't changed. The gentleman, Mr. Griffith, had an amendment. He withdrew it. He had the opportunity, but he withdrew it. So at this point, I will yield to the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for whatever time he may consume.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank Chairwoman Eshoo, the chair of our Health Subcommittee. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H.R. 1916, the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act. It's a bipartisan bill that will help patients with congenital anomalies and birth defects get the necessary treatment that they deserve. 3% of American children are born with congenital anomalies or birth defects that affect the way they look, the way they look, develop, or function, often for the rest of their lives. And these children require serious medical treatments. But for far too long, insurance companies have been unfairly denying treatment despite an official medical diagnosis by deeming it cosmetic or because the treatment involves dental services. But this is unacceptable. This treatment is critically important and medically necessary, particularly for children with serious dental anomalies. During our legislative hearing on this bill in committee, we heard from Kevin Kosser about his family's longstanding struggles to get his son Cannon's medical treatment covered. Cannon was diagnosed with ectodermal dysplasia when he was 1 year old, and this had a drastic impact on his health and quality of life. Ectodermal dysplasia is a congenital anomaly that affects the development of the hair, skin, teeth, and other body parts. Cannon sprouted his first tooth at the age of 4, and this has severely restricted his diet and impacted his ability to speak. In accordance with the treatment plan established by his doctor, his family began pursuing dentures for Cannon. However, their family health plan denied the medically necessary treatment for Cannon and deemed it as not a covered benefit, and the Kosser family is not alone. Madam Speaker, there are countless children across the country whose medically necessary treatments are unfairly denied by insurance companies. These children may have to forego the care they need to live healthy and fulfilling lives because their families simply can't afford the treatment. Too often, their families are stuck with the financial burden of paying out of pocket for medically necessary treatment despite having health insurance. And children like Cannon are forced to delay necessary care that is meant to restore bodily functions. The National Foundation for Ectodermal Dysplasias estimates that some families will pay upwards of $150,000 out of pocket in their lifetime for medically necessary treatments, and this is for medical care that should be rightfully covered by insurance. So the Ensuring Lasting Smiles Act would require all individual and group market health plans to cover medically necessary treatment resulting from congenital anomalies and ensure that children like Cannon get the treatment they need. This is important common sense legislation that has, as Ms. Eshu said, 310 bipartisan co-sponsors. And I want to commend Ms. Eshu for her leadership on this legislation as the prime sponsor of the bill. This important bill will improve the health and well-being of countless Americans and ensure that individuals born with congenital anomalies have the opportunity to live a healthy life. Children like Cannon and his family should have the peace of mind to know that medically necessary treatment will be covered. So, Madam Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I am prepared to close, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman reserved. He's the gentleman from California.
I don't have, we don't have any other speakers, but I'll reserve if the, until the other side.
The gentlewoman
completes.
reserves. The gentleman from Virginia.
I'm prepared to close, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
I appreciate this, Madam Speaker. I will submit that my amendment was not offered at the full committee 2 years ago when we were taking this through regular order. At that time, it was discussed that we would try to work on language that would narrow the scope before it came to the floor. Assuming that that would be done before this bill was brought up on a suspension, that has not happened, and I would be more than happy if we have to come to loggerheads over it, that we have that discussion where we can discuss all the potential costs, all the potential birth defects that might be covered, including the minor ones, the ones that don't have an effect on lasting smiles, which is also included in this. Now, the gentle lady's heart is in the right place, and I have great respect for her and understand what she's trying to do. I just think that there's so much unknown cost for so many minor birth defects and small inconveniences that might be cosmetic or might not be, depends on which doctor makes that decision, because we don't have a good definition either in the bill or in the standard lingo of the FDA, et cetera. I think we're buying a whole lot more expense both to the American taxpayer, and I believe this is going to push up the cost of health insurance on families that are already having difficulties making those health insurance payments. All of that is correct. And the chairman of the committee, also heart in the right place, mentioned ectodermal dysplasia. I have no problem with us treating that. It affects a small number of people. It is a huge cost on a handful of families out there, maybe a few more than a handful, but it does affect people disproportionately who cannot afford to have that fixed, and it does create huge problems on eating, on talking, etc. Those are the things we want to go after. What I want to make sure that we're not doing is that we're spending billions of dollars of American taxpayer dollars or raising the cost of health insurance because we're going to take care of everything down to 2 index fingernails missing, etc. That's my concern, Madam Speaker. As you can tell, I feel passionately about this, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for his kind comments about me, but not a but. I think that there are a couple of important points to be made, and that is that CBO estimates that insurers will respond to this bill by raising premiums by less than 0.1%. What CBO does not score are the savings from providing this needed medical care, because that medical care goes on and on and on, and families, the parents, and the cost to them are exorbitant. So, as I said earlier, today I think is a very good day. I want to acknowledge all the advocates from all over the country that work so hard to bring us to this moment. So with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and look forward to the vote today on this bill that has been with us since 2020.
The gentlewoman from California yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Bill H.R. 1916 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative. What purpose does the gentleman from Virginia rise?
I request the ayes and nays on this vote.
Pursuant to Section 3 of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings are postponed.